Dave Langley was the kind of guy who could go through a whole week without doing anything remarkable. His life was a series of routines, most of them revolving around an uninspiring IT job, microwave dinners, and an ever-growing collection of sarcastic quips stored in his mental database for social emergencies. So when a woman in a sleek silver jumpsuit walked into his favorite coffee shop and sat across from him, he figured she had the wrong guy. "Dave Langley," she said, her voice smooth, almost musical. Dave froze mid-sip of his coffee, droplets clinging to the corner of his mouth. Yeah? Who's asking? And, do I owe you money? Because if this is about the parking ticket, I have come to Earth because of you," she said with a tone so earnest it might as well have been carved into stone. The coffee Dave had just swallowed lodged itself somewhere between his throat and disbelief. He coughed, nearly overturning his cup. "Because of me? Lady, I'm flattered, but the last time someone said something that dramatic to me, it was my mom when I forgot her birthday." The woman, her skin so flawless it could have been airbrushed, her silvery hair shimmering like it had its own light source, leaned closer. "You misunderstand. My name is Zira. I am not from Earth." Dave blinked, then blinked again. "Not from Earth? Okay, so, Canada?" "A distant star system," she corrected, unfazed by his sarcasm. "I am here because you are critical to the survival of my people." Dave leaned back, debating whether this was a prank, a scam, or some new guerrilla marketing stunt. "Right. Okay, Zira from space. Quick question. Do you usually make house calls, or am I just lucky?" Zira tilted her head, puzzled. "House calls? I don't understand." Dave sighed. "Look, I'm going to assume this is some kind of mix-up. There's no way I'm critical to anything. The most exciting thing I've done all week is fix a server outage. Unless your planet runs on outdated Microsoft software, I'm probably not your guy." She placed a small metallic device on the table. It hummed faintly, and a translucent holographic screen blinked to life. On it was an intricate diagram of what appeared to be DNA. Dave squinted, recognizing enough of it to feel uneasy. "This," Zira began, gesturing to the display, "is your genetic sequence, unique, essential, chosen." "Chosen? For what? A space beauty pageant?" Dave asked, leaning closer despite himself. The hologram rotated, highlighting specific markers that glowed like miniature constellations. "How do you even have my DNA? Are you stalking me? Because that's a little invasive, even for a cosmic travel agency." Zira sighed, as if she were explaining multiplication to a particularly dim-witted child. "Your DNA contains an ancient marker linked to a universal energy source. My people's existence depends on this energy. Without it, our planet will collapse. You are the key to unlocking it." Dave stared at her, then at the hologram, then back at her. "Right, sure. And I suppose you also need my Netflix password to save the galaxy." Her eyes narrowed, a flicker of impatience breaking through her calm exterior. "I expected skepticism, but I did not anticipate such frivolity." "Lady, if you wanted serious, you came to the wrong planet," Dave replied, though his mind was racing. The hologram wasn't fake. At least, it didn't look fake. And the way she carried herself, calm, poised, entirely unconcerned by how absurd her story sounded, was unnervingly convincing. Just as he was about to dismiss her entirely, the lights in the coffee shop flickered. The air seemed to hum, a low vibration tickling the edges of his awareness. Zira's expression shifted, serene confidence giving way to sharp alertness. "They're here," she muttered. "Who's here?" Dave asked, the first tendrils of panic threading into his voice. Before she could answer, the front window of the coffee shop shattered inward. A figure, tall, armored, and distinctly not human, stepped through the shards, its eyes glowing a sickly green. Customers screamed, scattering like ants under a magnifying glass. Dave froze, his mind blank except for a single thought. This is not happening. Zira was on her feet in an instant, her metallic device transforming in her hand into something that looked like a cross between a stun gun and a tuning fork. She fired a beam of crackling blue energy at the intruder, who dodged with inhuman speed. "Dave, move!" Zira shouted, grabbing his arm and yanking him out of his chair. "Move where?" Dave yelped as she dragged him toward the back exit. "Do I look like I have an alien escape plan?" The armored figure pursued, its guttural voice growling in a language that made Dave's brain ache just hearing it. Zira fired again, the beam striking the wall and leaving a smoking hole the size of a watermelon. Dave's sense of humor, his only defense mechanism, kicked into overdrive. "Great, now I'm going to have to tip extra for damages," he said, ducking as Zira shoved him out the door and into the alley. She turned to him, her expression deadly serious. "This is no time for jokes." "It's the perfect time for jokes," Dave shot back, his voice climbing an octave. "Humor is how I process trauma." Zira raised her device, which beeped frantically. "We need to leave. Now." "And go where? You've got a spaceship parked out back?" Her silence answered the question. She pressed a button on her wristband, and a sleek, triangular craft decloaked right in front of them. Dave's jaw dropped. "Okay," he said, backing toward the ship as the armored figure emerged from the coffee shop. "So maybe you're not completely insane." Zira shoved him into the ship and climbed in after him. The door sealed shut, and the cockpit lit up with an array of glowing symbols that looked like hieroglyphics designed by a rave enthusiast. Zira slid into the pilot's seat, her hands moving with practiced precision. The ship lifted off just as the armored figure raised a weapon, firing a bolt of green energy that narrowly missed them. Dave clung to his seat, his knuckles white. "You have some explaining to do," he said, his voice shaky but still laced with sarcasm. "Like, for starters, why does the universe think I'm so special? And second, can I get a drink, preferably something stronger than coffee?" Zira glanced at him, a faint smile breaking through her tension. "You're taking this surprisingly well." "Lady," Dave replied, his voice tinged with hysteria, "I'm pretty sure I'm in shock." The ship shot into the sky, leaving Earth's atmosphere and Dave's mundane life behind. As stars filled the viewport, Dave realized two things. His life would never be the same, and he wasn't sure if that was a good thing or a cosmic disaster waiting to happen. The cabin of the spaceship hummed with a low, soothing vibration, a sound that reminded Dave Langley of the background noise in fancy spa commercials, the kind he'd never actually visited. Still pressed against the seat, he fought the urge to panic, oscillating between wide-eyed terror and giddy disbelief. "So, he ventured, his voice cracking slightly. "Is there an in-flight movie, or do I just stare out the window and contemplate my poor life choices?" Zira, seated in the pilot's chair, gave him a sidelong glance. "You are surprisingly calm for someone who was nearly vaporized by a bounty hunter." "Calm?" Dave forced out a laugh, his grip on the armrests tightening. "This is my stress response. Inside, I'm screaming loud enough to shatter glass. Outside, I make bad jokes." Zira returned her attention to the controls, her slender fingers dancing over holographic projections that hovered in midair. The ship banked left, giving Dave a stomach-dropping view of the Earth's curvature. His breath caught at the sight of his planet, a swirling marble of blues, greens, and whites, growing smaller by the second. "Okay," he said, finally peeling himself off the seat. "Assuming I don't pass out from existential dread, can we talk about the part where I'm apparently some kind of cosmic VIP?" Zira hesitated, her expression unreadable. She tapped a button, and the ship's interior lights dimmed slightly. "You deserve an explanation," she admitted, swiveling her chair to face him. "But first, tell me this. Have you ever felt different, like you were meant for something more than the life you've been living?" Dave frowned. "Sure, I've felt different, but I chalked it up to being the only guy in my high school who thought chess club was cooler than football. What does that have to do with—" He gestured vaguely at the spaceship around them. "This? It has everything to do with it," Zira said. She stood, her silver jumpsuit glinting faintly in the dim light. Your DNA carries a marker that's been dormant for millennia. It's an ancient code tied to a powerful energy source my people call the celestial core. Without it, our world, our entire civilization, will perish. Dave blinked at her, then raised a hand. Okay, but riddle me this. Why does this celestial core thing care about me? I'm not exactly the protagonist of the universe. I'm barely the protagonist of my own life. Zira tilted her head, her expression softening slightly. The core doesn't care about you. It's a beacon, attuned to certain genetic frequencies. Out of billions of humans, you are the only one whose DNA aligns perfectly with its resonance. Dave stared at her, processing the information in silence. Then, with impeccable timing, he deadpanned, "So you're telling me I'm basically a glorified tuning fork?" Zira's lips twitched, almost forming a smile. "In crude terms, yes." He leaned back, exhaling loudly. "Well, that's just great. I can barely keep a houseplant alive, and now I'm apparently responsible for saving an alien civilization. No pressure or anything." Before Zira could respond, the ship's dashboard emitted a series of rapid beeps. She turned sharply, her hands flying over the controls. The holographic interface displayed a series of red symbols that Dave couldn't read, but instinctively knew were bad news. "What's happening?" he asked, gripping the back of her chair. "We're being tracked," Zira said, her voice clipped. "The bounty hunter has a tracer on our ship." Dave groaned. "Of course he does, because why wouldn't my first space adventure include a homicidal alien Terminator?" "Hold on," Zira warned, pulling a lever that made the entire ship lurch violently. Dave was thrown back into his seat, the force of acceleration pinning him against the cushions. Outside, stars blurred into streaks of light as the ship jumped into faster-than-light travel. "Okay, that's definitely not normal," Dave yelled, his voice barely audible over the roar of the engines. "Relax," Zira said, her tone maddeningly calm. "This is basic interstellar travel." "Basic? Lady, the most advanced thing I've ever driven is a rental car with Bluetooth." Zira ignored him, focusing on the controls. After a few tense minutes, the ship's vibrations eased, and the stars outside settled back into their natural, stationary brilliance. Zira exhaled, her shoulders relaxing. "We've lost them for now," she said, leaning back in her chair. Dave sat up, his heart still racing. "Great, fantastic. So what's plan B? Because I'm guessing hide in space and hope for the best isn't a long-term solution." Zira hesitated, then glanced at him. "Plan B involves finding the celestial core and activating it before our enemies can catch up." Dave raised an eyebrow. "And where exactly is this magical core? Please don't say it's in a volcano or something." "It's on a remote planet in the Xanthari system," Zira replied, "a place few dare to venture." Dave groaned, running a hand through his hair. "Of course it is. Let me guess. It's crawling with deadly creatures and hostile locals?" Zira's silence was all the confirmation he needed. He threw up his hands. "Perfect. This just keeps getting better and better." Despite his sarcasm, a small part of him couldn't help but feel a flicker of excitement. For the first time in his life, he was part of something bigger, something extraordinary. As terrifying as it was also kind of amazing. "All right," he said, standing up and brushing imaginary dust off his jeans. "If I'm stuck in this intergalactic mess, I might as well lean into it. What's our next move?" Zira studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then, with a faint smile, she said, "Next, we prepare." "Prepare for what?" Dave asked, already regretting the question. Zira's eyes glinted with a mixture of determination and amusement. "For the adventure of your life." Dave sighed, rubbing his temples. "Great. Can we at least stop somewhere for snacks? I've got a feeling I'm going to need a lot of stress eating to get through this." As the ship cruised through the vast expanse of space, Dave couldn't help but wonder what he had gotten himself into. One thing was certain. His days of mundane routines were officially over. Dave Langley leaned against the cold metallic wall of Zira's ship, staring at the pile of bizarre gadgets she just dumped at his feet. All right, so this is, what, the intergalactic version of a starter pack? Zira didn't look up from the holographic console she was fiddling with. It's equipment you'll need to survive the Zenthari system. Trust me, you're going to need it. Dave crouched down, picking up what looked like a cross between a toaster and a handheld vacuum. And this? Is it a weapon? A universal translator? A galactic waffle maker? That's a plasma purifier, Zira said, her tone sharp. It'll filter toxins from the air, water, and food. The Zenthari system isn't exactly hospitable. He nodded slowly, setting the device down as if it might explode. Right. So no Taco Tuesdays on Planet Deathtrap, noted. Zira turned toward him, her silver jumpsuit catching the soft light of the cabin. Her gaze was unyielding. This isn't a joke, Dave. The Zenthari system is one of the most dangerous regions in the galaxy. If we're not prepared, we won't make it to the celestial core. Dave held up his hands in mock surrender. Hey, I'm taking this seriously. Seriously terrified. That counts, right? Her lips twitched in what might have been the beginnings of a smile, but she quickly turned away. We'll also need to train you to use some basic defense techniques. Defense techniques? He gave her an incredulous look. You've seen me try to hold a screwdriver, right? Now you want me to wield alien tech? Fantastic. Ignoring his protests, Zira picked up a sleek baton-like device from the pile. With a flick of her wrist, it extended into a glowing staff. She spun it effortlessly, the blue light humming through the air. This is an energy lance. It's versatile, lightweight, and effective in close combat. Dave's eyes widened. Cool. So do I get a lightsaber too, or is that extra? Zira handed him the lance, and he immediately fumbled it, nearly taking out his own knees. She sighed, stepping closer. Here, she said, adjusting his grip. Her hands were surprisingly warm despite the chill of the ship. He tried not to notice. This feels weird, like holding a broomstick that wants to kill me. Just focus, she said, her voice patient but firm. The lance responds to your movements. Try a simple strike. Dave swung the lance in what he thought was an impressive arc, only for it to whack against the wall with a loud clang. Zira winced. Good effort, she said diplomatically, but maybe less. Flailing next time. Noted, he muttered, rubbing his shoulder. Anything else in this pile of doom gear? Zira picked up a small metallic sphere. This is a graviton grenade. It creates a temporary gravity field, immobilizing anything within its radius. Dave stared at it. Yeah, I'm definitely going to accidentally blow myself up with that. She arched an eyebrow. That's why I'll hold on to it for now. He nodded sagely. Smart choice. So, do we get like a practice round before heading into the alien Thunderdome? Zira hesitated, then gestured toward a panel on the wall. It slid open to reveal a small training chamber filled with holographic targets and obstacles. Dave blinked. You've had this the whole time? And you're just now mentioning it? I wasn't sure you were ready, she admitted, but we don't have time to waste. He stepped into the chamber, gripping the energy lance like a baseball bat. The door closed behind him with an ominous hiss. Suddenly, holographic drones buzzed to life, circling him like metallic hornets. Oh, come on, he yelped, ducking as one zipped past his head. Use the lance, Zira's voice crackled through a speaker. Dave swung wildly, managing to clip one of the drones. It sparked and vanished, but two more replaced it immediately. Great, he muttered, sweat dripping down his forehead. It's like fighting a swarm of angry Roombas. Despite his clumsy attempts, he gradually started to get the hang of it. By the time he emerged from the chamber, panting and disheveled, he'd destroyed at least half the drones, though he suspected the program had been set to easy mode. Not bad, Zira said, handing him a towel. You might survive the Zenthari system after all. He slumped against the wall, clutching the lance like a lifeline. High praise coming from someone who's probably trained with alien ninjas. Zira didn't deny it, which only made him more nervous. Later, as they sat in the ship's galley, a small utilitarian space with mismatched chairs, Dave poked at a bowl of something Zira had called protein stew. It looked and smelled suspiciously like cat food. "So," he said, trying to distract himself from the meal, "what's our timeline? How long do we have before the bad guys catch up?" Zira took a sip of her own stew, unfazed by its questionable texture. "Hard to say. The tracer bought us some time, but it won't take them long to recalibrate their scanners. We need to leave the ship and find transport that's less conspicuous." "Leave the ship?" Dave frowned. "You mean the one with walls and shields and not deadly air?" "The Zenthari system isn't exactly welcoming to outsiders," Zira explained. "A ship like this will attract attention. We'll have to go on foot for part of the journey." "On foot? In space?" He gestured vaguely at the ceiling. "Do you hear how insane that sounds?" "Not in space," she corrected. "On the surface of Ventara Prime. It's a neutral trading hub, a good place to lay low and gather supplies." Dave groaned. "Let me guess. It's also full of shady characters and alien mobsters?" "More or less." He sighed, pushing his bowl away. "Great. Can't wait." Despite his grumbling, there was a spark of excitement in his chest. He was out of his depth, sure, but he was also part of something bigger than he'd ever imagined. And for the first time in years, he felt truly alive. As the ship hurtled toward its next destination, Dave couldn't help but wonder what lay ahead. One thing was certain: his life would never be the same. Dave Langley had barely adjusted to the quirks of Zira's ship when the console emitted a sharp, insistent beep. Zira leaned over the controls, her expression hardening as she scanned the readouts. "We're here," she said, her voice clipped. "Ventara Prime." Dave pressed his face against the nearest porthole, hoping for a glimpse of something spectacular. Instead, he was greeted by a sprawling, chaotic vista that looked like someone had thrown a junkyard into a blender and sprinkled it with neon lights. Towering spires of mismatched metal jutted into the sky, while a labyrinth of streets pulsed with alien life forms and the hum of hovering transports. "Wow," Dave muttered. "It's like Times Square had a baby with a scrapyard." Zira shot him a look. "Stay close, and don't draw attention to yourself." Dave straightened, placing a hand over his chest in mock offense. "Me? Draw attention? I'm the picture of subtlety." Zira ignored him, grabbing a satchel filled with essentials and striding toward the airlock. Dave followed, clutching the energy lance she'd reluctantly let him keep, after several hours of practice that left him with bruises and a newfound respect for holographic drones. The moment they stepped onto the surface of Ventara Prime, Dave was hit by a wave of heat and the sharp tang of ozone. The air was thick, buzzing with the chatter of countless alien languages and the occasional crackle of an overloaded power conduit. Vendors shouted from makeshift stalls, hawking everything from glowing fruits to suspiciously twitching creatures in glass jars. Dave's eyes widened as a hulking insectoid alien ambled past, its 6 legs clicking against the metal ground. "Okay," he whispered, leaning toward Zira. "What's the over-under on me getting eaten alive here?" "Low," Zira replied dryly. "As long as you keep your mouth shut." He mimed zipping his lips, but couldn't resist adding, "If I die, tell my mom I was being very brave." Their first stop was a dimly lit tavern crammed between 2 towering stacks of machinery. The sign above the door flickered with alien symbols that Dave couldn't begin to decipher. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with smoke and the sour tang of spilled drinks. Aliens of all shapes and sizes filled the space, from a trio of amphibious beings croaking in unison to a wiry creature with glowing eyes who seemed to be arguing with itself. Dave leaned closer to Zira as they approached the bar. "This place is like the cantina scene from Star Wars, but scarier." Zira ignored him, focusing on the bartender, a grizzled alien with translucent skin that revealed a network of pulsating veins beneath. She spoke quickly, in a language Dave couldn't understand, sliding a small device across the counter. The bartender examined it, then nodded, gesturing toward a shadowy corner of the room. Zira motioned for Dave to follow, her expression unreadable. As they wove through the crowd, Dave couldn't help but notice the way heads turned to watch them. Or rather, to watch Zira. Her silver jumpsuit and confident stride stood out in a way that made Dave feel like a walking target by association. They reached the corner booth, where a reptilian alien with scales that shimmered like oil was waiting. Its eyes narrowed as it took in Zira, then flicked to Dave with mild disdain. "You brought a human?" It rasped, its voice like sandpaper. "He's with me," Zira said firmly, sliding into the booth. Dave hesitated before sitting beside her, trying not to look too out of place. The alien's gaze lingered on Dave for a moment longer before turning back to Zira. "What do you want?" "Transport," Zira said. "Something fast and untraceable." The alien let out a low, hissing laugh. "Fast and untraceable doesn't come cheap." Zira pulled a small, glowing chip from her satchel and placed it on the table. The alien's eyes lit up with greed, but it quickly masked its reaction, leaning back with an air of indifference. "This will do," it said. "Dock 17, Level 4. The ship will be ready in an hour." Zira nodded, standing. Dave followed suit, eager to leave the oppressive atmosphere of the tavern. As they stepped back into the chaotic streets, Dave let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "That went well. I mean, no one tried to kill us, so that's a win, right?" Zira didn't respond, her eyes scanning the crowd. "We need to keep moving. The less time we spend here, the better." Their path to Dock 17 took them through a maze of narrow alleys and rickety walkways. Dave's nerves were on edge, his grip on the energy lance tightening with every shadow that seemed to move. "So," he said, trying to lighten the mood, "what happens if this ship turns out to be a lemon? Do we get a refund?" Zira shot him a look that could have frozen lava. "Focus." They reached Dock 17 without incident, but as they approached the designated ship, a sleek black vessel that looked like it had been designed for smuggling, Zira suddenly stopped, her body tensing. "What?" Dave whispered, his heart racing. "What is it?" "We're being followed," she said quietly. "Don't look." Naturally, Dave immediately turned his head, earning an exasperated glare from Zira. "Subtle," she muttered. "Just keep walking." Dave forced himself to move, his palms slick with sweat. They reached the ship's boarding ramp, and Zira wasted no time inputting a code into the control panel. The ramp lowered with a hiss, and she gestured for Dave to go first. He hesitated. "Ladies first?" "Go," she snapped, pushing him up the ramp. As soon as they were inside, Zira sealed the hatch and powered up the ship. Through the viewport, Dave saw a group of shadowy figures converging on the dock. Zira?" he said nervously. "We've got company." "Hold on," she replied, her fingers flying over the controls. The ship roared to life, lifting off just as the figures reached the dock. Blaster fire erupted, but the ship's shields absorbed the hits as they soared into the sky. Dave slumped into a seat, his heart pounding. So much for a quiet getaway. Zira didn't respond, her focus on piloting. As Ventara Prime dwindled behind them, she finally relaxed, leaning back in her seat. "Well," Dave said, attempting a weak grin, "I'd give that escape a solid 7 out of 10, points deducted for the blaster fire." Zira glanced at him, and to his surprise, a small smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. "Not bad for your first off-world adventure, human." Dave chuckled, the tension in his chest easing. For the first time, he felt like he might actually survive this, as long as he stuck close to Zira, and avoided any more angry aliens, of course. Zira's ship, the Sable Star, hummed as it drifted through the void, the quiet a stark contrast to the chaos they'd just fled. Dave leaned back in his seat, still catching his breath. His energy lance lay on his lap, the power cell depleted from an earlier misfire. You're going to recharge that, right? Zira asked, her eyes flicking to the weapon. Dave tilted his head, feigning deep thought. Recharge it? I was thinking of framing it as a keepsake. The lance that barely worked. Has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? Zira groaned and turned her attention back to the controls. Humans. Always joking when they should be preparing. Dave gestured dramatically. Hey, humor is my survival mechanism. You deal with aliens, I'll deal with the punchlines. She sighed but didn't argue. Instead, she tapped a screen displaying a series of maps and charts. We've got a few hours before we hit the next jump point. Use the time to rest. Dave settled in but found his mind racing. Rest wasn't exactly an option when you've narrowly avoided being vaporized. He watched Zira as she worked, her movements precise and purposeful. Her silver hair shimmered under the dim lights, a stark contrast to her sharp, determined features. So, Zira, Dave began, leaning forward, are we going to talk about the shadowy figures shooting at us back there? Or are we pretending that's just another Tuesday for you? She gave him a sidelong glance. They were bounty hunters. Dave's eyebrows shot up. Bounty hunters? Like plural? How much are we worth? Not we, Zira corrected, her tone cool. Me. They don't care about you. Dave feigned offense. Ouch. Not even a little bit? What if I wore a sign that says sidekick? Zira shook her head, though her lips twitched ever so slightly. You wouldn't last 5 minutes on your own. Dave smirked. True, but with you around, I'm basically invincible. Zira rolled her eyes and turned back to the controls, but Dave caught the faintest hint of amusement on her face. A few hours later, the ship's console chirped, signaling their arrival at the jump point. Zira flipped a series of switches, and the Sable Star began to hum louder as the hyperspace engines powered up. The stars outside the viewport elongated, forming streaks of light as the ship accelerated. Hyperspace, Dave mused, watching the spectacle. Always wanted to see this in real life. Feels like I'm in a screensaver. Zira arched an eyebrow. A what? Never mind, Dave said quickly. Cultural reference. You wouldn't get it. She shrugged, her attention shifting back to the controls. We'll be in hyperspace for about 6 hours. You should get some sleep. Dave stood, stretching. I'll try, but if I dream about being chased by alien bounty hunters, that's on you. Zira smirked. I'll take my chances. Dave's attempt at sleep was short-lived. He'd just started to drift off when the ship's alarms blared, jolting him upright. He stumbled into the cockpit to find Zira furiously working the controls, her expression grim. What's happening? He asked, his voice tinged with panic. We've been pulled out of hyperspace, she replied, her tone clipped. Interdiction field. Enter what now? Dave asked, gripping the back of her seat for support. Someone doesn't want us to leave, Zira explained, pointing to the viewport. Dave followed her gaze and felt his stomach drop. A massive ship loomed ahead, its dark hull bristling with weaponry. It was easily 5 times the size of the Sable Star and looked like it meant business. Great, Dave muttered. It's the Death Star's angry cousin. Zira ignored his commentary, her focus on the controls. They're hailing us. Dave straightened. Oh, good. Maybe they just want to chat. Zira shot him a look. Stay quiet. She activated the comms, and a harsh, guttural voice filled the cockpit. Unknown vessel, you are in violation of restricted space. Prepare to be boarded. Dave's eyes widened. Boarded? That doesn't sound good. No, Zira agreed, her hands flying over the controls. It doesn't. The Sable Star shuddered as the larger ship locked onto it with a tractor beam. Zira cursed under her breath, pulling up a holographic display of the ship's systems. Can we fight them? Dave asked, though he already suspected the answer. Zira shot him a withering look. With what? Harsh language? Dave threw up his hands. Just asking. The ship jolted as it was pulled into the larger vessel's hangar. Zira stood, grabbing her satchel and a small device that looked suspiciously like a grenade. "Stay behind me," she ordered. Dave followed her down the ramp, his heart pounding. The hangar was filled with armored soldiers, their weapons trained on the pair. At the center of the formation stood a tall, imposing figure in ornate armor. "Well, well," the figure said, its voice dripping with mockery. "Zira, the infamous fugitive. And what's this?" It gestured to Dave. "A pet?" Dave bristled. "Hey, I'll have you know I'm a highly capable—" Zira cut him off with a sharp glare. "Don't." The armored figure chuckled. "How charming. Unfortunately for you, this is where your little adventure ends." Zira's hand moved subtly toward her satchel. Dave noticed and tried to distract the soldiers. Wait, he said, stepping forward with his hands raised. "Let's talk about this. Maybe we can—" Before he could finish, Zira hurled the grenade-like device to the ground. A blinding flash filled the hangar, followed by a thick cloud of smoke. Chaos erupted as soldiers shouted and fired blindly. "Run!" Zira yelled, grabbing Dave's arm and pulling him toward the nearest corridor. They sprinted through the ship, alarms blaring around them. Dave struggled to keep up, his lungs burning. "Do you have a plan?" he gasped. "Get to the escape pods," Zira replied, not slowing down. Dave managed a weak grin. "Good plan. Love a classic." By the time they reached the escape pods, the ship's soldiers were closing in. Zira shoved Dave into one of the pods and followed, slamming the hatch shut behind her. "Hold on," she said, punching in the launch sequence. The pod ejected with a jolt, hurtling into space. Dave clung to his seat, his knuckles white. "Well," he said after a moment, his voice shaky, "that was fun. Let's never do it again." Zira let out a breath, slumping in her seat. "Agreed." As the pod drifted away from the enemy ship, Dave allowed himself a small smile. Despite the danger, he couldn't deny the thrill of it all. "You know," he said, "for a fugitive, you're pretty good at this whole staying alive thing." Zira gave him a tired smirk. "And for a human, you're not completely useless." Dave chuckled, the tension finally easing. For now, they were safe. And with Zira by his side, he felt ready for whatever came next. The escape pod hummed softly, its life support systems doing their best to maintain a breathable atmosphere while drifting through the expanse of space. Dave stared out of the small viewport, watching the distant glow of stars and nebulae. Despite the vastness, the pod felt suffocatingly small, especially with Zira silently fuming across from him. "So," Dave ventured, breaking the silence, "what now? Do we just wait for your intergalactic AA to come tow us?" Zira shot him a withering look. "You really can't stop talking, can you?" "Talking helps me think," Dave said defensively. "And it's either that or I start humming show tunes, and trust me, no one wants that." "I'd rather take my chances with the silence," Zira muttered, turning her attention to the pod's control panel. She tapped a few buttons, her expression growing darker by the second. "Great. Our trajectory is stable, but the beacon's range is too short. If we're lucky, someone friendly will pick up the signal in a few hours." "And if we're unlucky?" Dave asked. Zira's silence was answer enough. Their time crawled as they waited. Dave attempted to pass the time by recounting every movie he'd ever seen that involved space pods, much to Zira's dismay. "Let me guess," she interrupted at one point. "Most of them end with the characters being rescued at the last second by an impossibly convenient spaceship?" Dave grinned. "Well, yeah. It's called dramatic tension. People love a good deus ex machina." Zira groaned. Humans. Their banter was cut short by a sudden blip on the control panel. Zira's head snapped up, her fingers flying over the console. "What is it?" Dave asked, leaning in. "A ship," Zira said, her voice tight. "But the signal scrambled. I can't tell if it's friend or foe." Dave's grin faltered. "Let's hope it's not another one of your bounty-hunting fan clubs." As the ship grew closer, its silhouette became clearer. It was sleek and angular, with an ominous red glow emanating from its engines. Dave's optimism took a nosedive. "That's not friendly, is it?" he asked. Zira didn't answer. Instead, she grabbed a small device from her satchel and handed it to Dave. "What's this?" he asked, turning it over in his hands. "A neural scrambler," she said. "If they board us, use it to disable their comms." Dave frowned. "And what are you going to do?" Zira's eyes gleamed with determination. "Whatever it takes." The enemy ship docked with the pod, its airlock hissing open to reveal a group of heavily armed soldiers. Their armor was sleek and black, their faces hidden behind reflective visors. Zira stepped forward, her posture relaxed but her eyes scanning every movement. "Well, well," one of the soldiers said, his voice distorted by his helmet. "The infamous Zira. You've been a hard one to catch." "That's because I don't like being caught," Zira replied coolly. The soldier's helmet tilted as if he were smirking. "And who's your friend? Another one of your expendable pawns?" Dave raised a hand. "Actually, I'm more of a consultant. Very non-expendable, thank you." The soldier ignored him, signaling for his team to advance. Zira moved with lightning speed, tossing a smoke grenade that filled the pod with a thick, acrid fog. Dave fumbled with the neural scrambler, finally activating it just as Zira engaged the soldiers in hand-to-hand combat. Through the haze, Dave could see her moving like a blur, disarming one soldier and using his weapon to take down another. Dave, meanwhile, focused on staying out of the way, using the scrambler to disrupt the soldiers' comms. "How's it going?" he called out, ducking as a stray shot hit the wall above him. "Fine," Zira grunted, flipping a soldier over her shoulder. "Just keep them off balance." "Yeah, because I'm great at that," Dave muttered. Eventually, the remaining soldiers retreated, their comms fried and their leader incapacitated. Zira stood over him, her breathing heavy but her expression triumphant. "You're going to tell us who sent you," she demanded, pressing the barrel of a confiscated weapon against his chest. The soldier laughed weakly. "You'll find out soon enough. They'll never stop coming for you." Zira's jaw tightened, but before she could respond, the soldier activated a small device on his wrist. An instant later, he dissolved into a cloud of shimmering particles, leaving only his armor behind. Dave stared at the empty space where the soldier had been. "Okay, that's unsettling." Zira didn't answer. She was already back at the control panel, scanning for any sign of reinforcements. "We need to get out of here," she said. "Now." Hours later, after narrowly evading another patrol, the pod finally drifted into the gravity well of a small, uninhabited moon. Zira guided it to a bumpy landing, the pod skidding to a halt on the rocky surface. Dave stepped out, stretching his legs and looking around. The landscape was barren but oddly beautiful, with jagged rock formations and a pale, silvery light illuminating the ground. "Well," he said, "if nothing else, it's got great ambiance." Zira ignored him, setting up a portable transmitter. "We'll use this to call for help, but it could take days for anyone to reach us." Dave sat on a nearby rock, watching her work. Despite the danger and uncertainty, he couldn't help but admire her determination. "You know," he said, "you're pretty amazing." Zira paused, glancing at him. "Is that your attempt at a compliment?" "Just calling it like I see it," Dave said with a grin. For the first time, Zira smiled, a real, genuine smile. "Maybe you're not entirely useless after all," she said. Dave laughed, the sound echoing across the empty moon. For now, at least, they were safe. But he knew their journey was far from over. The small moon felt timeless. Pale light bathed the rocky surface, making the jagged formations shimmer like glass. Despite the alien serenity, tension lingered between Dave and Zira as they prepared for the next phase of their unpredictable journey. A chirp from the portable transmitter broke the stillness. Zira jumped up, her posture rigid. "Incoming signal. Let's hope it's not another bounty hunter." Dave leaned over her shoulder, squinting at the screen. It says friendly contact in squiggly alien font. Is that good? She sighed. That's a Sargon vessel. They're not allies, but they don't shoot first. Reassuring, Dave deadpanned. So what's the plan? Send them a fruit basket? Zira's lips quirked in the faintest of smiles. You have a unique way of being useless and helpful at the same time. Let me handle this. The Sargon cruiser descended into the moon's thin atmosphere with mechanical precision. Its sleek, geometric design looked like it belonged in an art exhibit rather than in space warfare. When the landing ramp lowered, a tall figure clad in flowing robes emerged, flanked by 2 guards. Zira stepped forward to greet them, leaving Dave to mutter, "Great, space politicians. My favorite." "Zira of Tylos," the robed figure said in a voice as smooth as silk. "Your reputation precedes you, and who is your companion?" His gaze lingered on Dave with thinly veiled amusement. "Just a stray I picked up," Zira replied casually. "We need safe passage to the Tylon Expanse. Can you help?" The figure's expression shifted, a mix of intrigue and caution. "That depends. What's in it for us?" Dave, unable to resist, piped up. "I've got a killer lasagna recipe, guaranteed to impress at intergalactic potlucks." Zira shot him a glare that could freeze lava. "What he means is that we can provide valuable intel about—" She hesitated, her eyes narrowing. "The Syndicate." The robed leader's expression hardened. "We'll discuss terms aboard. Leave your weapons here." Aboard the Sargon ship, Dave couldn't help but gawk at the interior. The walls shimmered with a holographic display of star charts, and the air smelled faintly of something like citrus. "Do all alien ships smell this fancy?" he whispered to Zira. "Shut up, Dave," she hissed back. Their escort led them to a circular chamber filled with floating orbs that displayed tactical readouts. Zira and the robed figure engaged in a heated discussion, their voices low and tense. Dave, meanwhile, fiddled with a small orb on the edge of the table, which promptly projected a hologram of himself. "Whoa," he muttered. "I look good in 3D. One of the guards snickered before regaining his stoic composure. Zira shot Dave another death glare, but continued negotiating. After what felt like an eternity, the Sargons agreed to transport them, on the condition that Zira owed them a favor. Dave didn't like the sound of that, but wisely kept his mouth shut. For once. Back in their assigned quarters, Dave flopped onto the bunk, stretching out. "So, what's the next step in this epic space adventure?" Zira leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "We reach the Tylon Expanse, then find a way to neutralize the bounty on my head." Dave grinned. "Sounds easy. What could possibly go wrong?" She raised an eyebrow. "You really need to stop tempting fate." So the journey to the Tylon Expanse was uneventful until they hit a rogue asteroid field. The ship's alarms blared, and the Sargon captain barked orders in a language Dave couldn't understand. Is this normal?" Dave asked as the ship shook violently. Zira strapped herself into a seat. "Define normal in space travel terms." Dave opted to buckle in instead of replying. The ship navigated the field with impressive agility, but not before a stray asteroid clipped one of the engines. The resulting jolt sent Dave's coffee-like drink flying into his lap. "Seriously?" he groaned. "First aliens, now zero-gravity laundry disasters?" Zira chuckled, surprising him. "You'll survive, human." When they finally reached the Tylon Expanse, it was like nothing Dave had ever seen. The expanse was a kaleidoscope of colors, swirling and shifting in mesmerizing patterns. Zira's expression softened as she gazed at it, and Dave couldn't help but notice the hint of vulnerability in her eyes. "Home sweet home?" he asked gently. She nodded. "It's not perfect, but it's mine." They docked at a hidden outpost, where Zira's contacts helped them lay low. Over the next few days, they worked together to decode a stolen syndicate data core that Zira had taken during their initial escape. The data revealed the syndicate's plans to destabilize several systems, and Zira's resolve hardened. "We have to stop them," she said. Dave frowned. You mean we? Like, the two of us against an intergalactic crime syndicate? Zira smirked. You're catching on. In the final moments of their time at the outpost, Dave found himself reflecting on how much had changed. He'd gone from a hapless earthling to someone Zira actually seemed to trust. Maybe even, like, "Hey," he said, approaching her as she prepped their ship. "For what it's worth, I'm glad I got abducted." She glanced at him, her expression unreadable. Then, to his surprise, she smiled. "You're not the worst companion I've had. Just don't make me regret it." "No promises," Dave said with a grin. As the ship lifted off, leaving the Tylon expanse behind, Dave realized he wasn't just along for the ride anymore. He had a purpose, however reckless and insane it might be. And with Zira by his side, he felt ready to face whatever the galaxy threw at them.